All right, we're going to just quickly go over lesson 2.4, adding and subtracting decimals. I know that most of you are familiar with that, but we need to think about why we line up our decimal points when we're adding and subtracting decimals. We just need to practice adding and subtracting decimals. So if we look at this first exploration, let's see if I can get it to move up here. We're going to look at number lines. As for instance, on this number line, we have A, we have B. If you'll notice, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 marks. That means it's marked off in tenths. So this would be 3/10, and this would be 8/10. So if you add 3/10 plus 8/10, you get 11/10, or 1 1/10. That's what they're looking for here. So 1 1/10. But if you subtract them, if you say 8/10 minus 3/10, you end up with 5/10. And they're just trying to show you that you can use the number line to do that. We can check that and see that that's true. This one is also marked in tenths. Well, it's actually marked, this is 1 1/10, 1 2/10. So the smaller marks are actually hundredths. So this would be 1.11, 1.12, or 1.11, 1.12, 1.13, 1.14, 1.15, 1.16, 1.17, 1.18, 1.19, 1.2. That's not the right way to say it, but you get the idea. So if this is 1.13 and this is 1.11, if you add those together, you would get 2.24. But if you subtract them, if you say 1.13 or 1 1300ths minus 1 1100ths, then you get 200ths for an answer. And they're just showing you can use a number line to do that. So I'm just going to quickly show that to you. Move on to the next example. Now the reason we line up our decimal points is because we're thinking about the place value chart. It's very important that we are adding ones to ones and tens to tens and hundreds to hundreds. And so that's why I just want to quickly show you this place value chart. And let's say we had the number 1 1300ths. We would need to make sure we have 1 here. I'm just making up a... And let's suppose we want to add, let's say 1 1200ths. Oop, 1 1200ths to that. So if you don't line up your decimal points, you could get some really weird answers. You add just like you normally do. You can see what I'm talking about. So here you're adding your hundredths, your tenths, and your ones. All right, so to add or subtract decimals, you write the numbers vertically and line up the decimal points, and you bring down the decimal point first. Go ahead and bring it on down, and then you add or subtract as you would with whole numbers, just like you're used to doing. So here's the first example. They're adding 8 1300ths plus 2 7600ths. They estimate their answer to be 11. Notice they line up their decimal points. They bring down their decimal point. They add as you would with whole numbers. So that would be starting to the far right. They're going to add their hundredths, their tenths, and then their ones place. Is their answer reasonable? Is this close to 11? Yes. All right. This is where sometimes people get confused. They want to push everything over to the right, but you cannot do it that with decimals. With whole numbers, that's fine. With decimals, you need to line up your decimal points. So what is here then is the question. Like, what would we have here? And I think all of you know, because you're in 6th grade, that you would just put a couple of zeros there. I call them placeholder zeros. They're holding the hundredths and the thousandths place is what I think. Bring your decimal point down, add your thousandths, add your hundredths, add your tenths. Notice that's 11. So you have one whole that carries over to the ones place. You add your ones, 1, 1, 3, 5, and 2. And as I've said before, anytime you want to, you can stop the video and look at it. All right, moving on to subtracting decimals. Very similar, except most people don't like subtracting as much, but it's very similar. You're going to estimate close to 6, close to 3. 6 minus 3 is 3. We line up our decimal points. We subtract 8 minus 4, 0 minus 7. Can't do that, so we're going to have to regroup. So we take from the tenths place, now it's 4 tenths, and we give that to the hundredths place. We subtract, this is just like normal subtraction. And our answer is reasonable. Now what happens here? Well, we do the same thing as we did when we were adding. We put 2 zeros there for placeholders. And we have to use them. So notice that we're saying 0 minus 5. Don't get tricked and try to do 5 minus 0. That's completely different. So we have to regroup, or borrow, as some people say. This is no longer a 9, now it's an 8. And it gives that 10 to the hundredths place. And then we take, let's see if it will show you. Yeah. Then we take from there and give it to there. I personally look at that as a 90 and say, can I take 1 from 90? Yes, I would be left with 89, and I give that 1 to the 0, so now it's a 10. But you can do it either way. Subtract, and there's your answer. Your answer is reasonable too. Because it's like basically 22 minus 2. All right, so let's look at one more thing, and that is the example 3. If you were in the book, it would be page 69, but you're not in the book, so you have to trust me. Remember, like I said, this chapter is uploaded online. Every once in a while, I do something where it doesn't like how I move my mouse. There we go. All right, a gymnast score for a routine is calculated by finding the sum of a difficulty score and an execution score minus any penalties. The execution score starts at 10 and is reduced by deductions. The gymnast score can be represented by this numeric expression. 6 9 tenths plus 10 minus 1 and 534 thousandths minus 3 tenths. What is the gymnast score? So you can see here, this gymnast earned a 6.9 for the difficulty score, actual execution score, and then penalty score. What would we do first? Well, we would do the parentheses, and inside of the parentheses we have subtraction. Now I'm going to tell you that you're going to need to use scratch paper for that, and I don't have a way to show you on here, but it would be 10 point, you would write 10.000 minus 1.534 in order to line up your decimal points. And of course, if you were using a calculator, you just subtract it. Now we have addition and subtraction, so we go in order from left to right. We add first, then we subtract. Same thing, line up your decimal points. And so that is the gymnast score. All right. I think there's one more example. Yep, one more. I'm going to look at this. This is the Lincoln, or an illustration of the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. Hopefully it'll show in just a second. It's approximately rectangular, pretty much a rectangle. Its width is 50 and 9/10 meters, and its length is 618 and 44 hundredths meters. Sorry, I said this one incorrectly. You walk the perimeter of the pool. How many meters do you walk? Well, there's a couple of things you need to know here. First of all, you need to know what a rectangle is. You need to know something about rectangles, which is the width would be the same at both ends, or whatever you want to look at, and the length would be the same on both sides, however you want to look at that. So it would be directly opposite of each other. They're the same length, right angles. You walk the perimeter of the pool, so you got to think about what is perimeter. Perimeter is the distance around something. So they want you to draw a diagram, and we're going to label the dimensions, obviously not drawn to scale. So we're going to label it. So the width is 50 and 9/10 meters. That would be the shorter side, so that makes sense. Notice this and this, they're equal because it's a rectangle. And then you do the lengths, and they're both 618 and 44 hundredths. Now we want to know the perimeter. If we were doing the area, we would multiply these two things together, but we want the perimeter. Perimeter is the distance around. So we're going to add all of these together. Notice they line up their decimal points, bring down their decimal point, they put placeholder zeros, and they just start adding. They said you could check for reasonableness. This is close to 620, that's close to 620, those are close to 50. That would add up to that. So your answer is reasonable. All right, so I've loaded up these 3 videos. You know that I included the answer keys online for you to look at. Remember, anytime you use the answer keys to check your answers, make sure that you can't just write down the answer. You have to show your work. If you get it wrong, show your corrected work, okay? And I guess that's it. That was a pretty short video. Probably Wednesday, Thursday, I'll do 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, which have to do more with decimals. All right, we'll talk to y'all later.